I don't need a wife who's away for days, leaving chores and cleaning undone. We're getting a divorce. Sean sent me a letter out of the blue just as I returned from a business trip overseas. If he was gonna go there, fine, let's really go through with this divorce. It felt like a tit for tat, but maybe it was more like a blessing in disguise. And Sean, oh Sean, you really missed out on a great catch. My name's Mindy. I'm 36, and recently, all these young actors seem to blend into one face to me. Not to mention, I can't tell one idol from another. I used to be on top of all the trends, yet now, I find supermarket discount stickers more interesting than idols. Maybe it's a sign of getting older. About 3 years ago, I was on cloud 9, having just gotten engaged to my boyfriend Sean, who was originally my boss. He was good at looking at the big picture at work and was very reliable. He always took the lead during our relationship, and I was sure he would make a dependable husband. I was really looking forward to our future together. Such girly thoughts I had. But when it came to personal life, my judgment was admittedly naive. The first sign came during a visit for marriage introductions. Initially, I wasn't uncomfortable or anything. I was impressed by his seemingly kind parents. Ted, his father, would constantly ask his wife Barbara, "Another cup of coffee, please." "Barbara, could you check the mailbox?" "Throw this away for me, sweetheart." Surprisingly, she just did whatever her husband asked, without complaint. He wouldn't even bother to use a trash can right beside him, asking her to throw away trash even when she was far away. Seriously, just do it yourself, I thought in my head. But coming from a single-parent home, the dynamics of a household with a father were somewhat foreign to me. Is this how it's supposed to be? Sean's silence on the matter was slightly troubling, but I figured each family has its quirks, and if she didn't mind, it wasn't my place to comment. Fortunately, Sean lived alone and managed his own affairs, which I observed firsthand. I optimistically thought he was nothing like his father. People only see what they want to see. Who was it that said that? "Mindy, the remote." "You can get it yourself. It's right there." "Oh, come on." Once we got married, these exchanges became more frequent. He'd hand me a glass and say, "Please," or ask me to prepare his clothes after a bath. At least these requests were understandable. But then there were times he'd say, "Get that ready, please," and expect me to know what that was. And if I got it wrong, he'd complain, "This isn't it. Try to understand what I want." Sean never cleaned up after himself, leaving things everywhere. The toilet was a mess too. He'd lift the seat, but then leave splashes on the floor, essentially leaving it as is. Despite my efforts to keep the house clean, it would be a mess again within hours, which was demotivating. You'd think he could at least notice the mess and clean up a bit. When I mentioned this, he said, "I didn't realize it was dirty. If you noticed it, you should clean it up." That was a bit much for me, so about 3 months into our marriage, I suggested we split the household chores. However, he looked puzzled and asked, "Why?" That is exactly my question for you. Why don't you even understand that? When I explained that sharing chores is normal for couples living together, especially since we both worked, he countered, "But you work from home, and I have to go to the office. How can I do household chores?" "But working from home doesn't mean I'm free all day, you know. I still make time for chores, and so can you." His response was dismissive. "So you're just better at it. You should do it all." His tone was off-putting, almost as if he was distancing himself. Sean then justified, "It's only natural for a wife to take care of the house. My mom even washed my dad's hair." To which I replied, "Really? That's just weird." He brushed it off as normal, then criticized my cooking. You're just lazy with the meals. Excuse me? What do you mean, lazy? You use stock cubes in the cooking. I saw it. How can you notice that, but not see the mess you make? If you didn't make such a mess, I'd have more time for cooking. Don't blame me. That's why you couldn't stick with the job at our company. I reminded him. We agreed I'd leave the company. That's why I started my own business. And don't change the subject. What started as a simple conversation about sharing chores spiraled into a huge argument. Was it fair to criticize my upbringing and character? How awful for him to say it's because I was raised by a single mother. I wanted to complain about his patriarchal expectations. Regret started to creep in about our marriage. After such a fight, I hoped he'd reconsider his habits, but the toilet was as dirty as ever the next morning. It seemed almost intentional. I hate starting my day with cleaning the toilet. Following our fight, Sean accused. I never thought you'd become such a demanding wife after marriage. It seemed he had expected me to cater to him as his mother did for his father. So he saw my independence as selfishness. Who is he to tell me all this when he doesn't even lift a finger around the house? Despite our fight, reaching an understanding with him felt impossible. As a newlywed, was I really supposed to endure this? Is marriage something you need to work so hard on by cultivating perseverance? I'm clueless when it comes to stuff like this, as I have just gotten married. I work from home as an international stationery buyer, a skill I honed at the same company Sean still works for. After leaving, I started my own business, changing the product line out of respect. Amidst my relationship turmoil, my overseas buyer fell ill, hinting I might need to travel abroad to sustain our operations. Sean's immediate reaction to my impending trip was, I wasn't aware of any business trip. Well, I'm telling you now. When I mentioned it was a recent development, his disdain for me traveling was palpable. He asked, Who will take care of the house while you're gone? Well, since you're the only one here, obviously you. So you're prioritizing work over our home? What matters more to you, work or home? Look, I manage both just fine. It's just a week away. The money you bring in is so small anyway. You should focus more on supporting me, the main breadwinner. I'm contributing to our living expenses from what I earn too, so it's not like it's a small amount. I don't care anymore. I'm not approving your business trip. You need to cool off. I won't speak to you until you realize your mistake and come to apologize. He declared, slamming the living room door shut and stomping up to our bedroom on the second floor. True to his words, he started ignoring me from the next day, but I was far from ready to back down. I didn't think for a moment that my words or thoughts were wrong. Apologizing now, just to make up, would only reinforce his belief that I should naturally do all the housework. I ended up going on my business trip without having the chance to mend things. A week later, I returned from my trip feeling calm. My collaborators seemed to be recovering faster than expected, and it looked like I'd be able to keep the business going. Meeting with the new manufacturers directly was truly worth the trip. I landed back home filled with more motivation than ever, thinking maybe it was time for an honest conversation with my husband. But if he still didn't understand, then that's that. Imagine my shock when I returned home to find all his belongings gone. The kitchen had cups left out, and his pajamas from the morning I left for my trip were tossed in the laundry basket. There was no doubt about it. He had left the house the day I went on my trip. What? Is this some kind of spite? I muttered irritably as I tried calling his cell, but he didn't pick up. I even called his parents' house, but they insisted he wasn't there. It seemed he was going to work, but they wouldn't put me through, probably because he didn't want to talk. Fine, be that way, I thought for a few days on my own, until one day an envelope from the post office arrived. It was from him. Ignoring my calls but sending a letter? What's he thinking? Inside, a divorce paper signed by him appeared. Along with it was a letter. I don't need a wife who's away for days, leaving chores and cleaning undone. We're getting a divorce. Apologize now if you're going to. I couldn't help but burst into laughter. Laughing so hard alone in the house was embarrassingly hilarious. Despite all the running around and not picking up calls, the return address was his parents' house, making it obvious where he was. What's he really trying to do? Does he think I'd go begging to his parents' house? Especially saying, apologize now if you're going to, he must be thinking I wouldn't file for divorce. But he should have at least sent an unsigned divorce paper if he was going to do this. Really, he's such an idiot. He used to be a boss I admired, but now he's nothing like he used to be. His ridiculously stupid actions helped me clear my head of any doubts. So, shall I just submit this divorce paper to the city office as you wished? With that, I decided to proceed with the divorce. It was a whirlwind divorce, really. I asked my mom and a former coworker for their signatures as witnesses, and they were shocked. Aren't you going to regret this? They worried. But when I laughed off their concerns and explained everything, they both smiled relievedly and agreed, divorce is the right choice. The divorce paper was successfully filed, and 2 weeks later, shockingly on a Sunday morning, the doorbell rang insistently. Wondering what was happening, I peeked out the window to see my mother-in-law, or rather my former mother-in-law, standing there. Can't really ignore this, I thought, and reluctantly opened the door, only to find, not visible from the window, Sean standing beside her. Mindy, please do something about this boy, she pleaded. I was dumbfounded by her request. When I asked what was going on, she said, ever since he came back to our house after fighting with you, he literally does nothing. Not just doing nothing, he's really getting in the way, she complained. Hey, you've been taking care of Dad, so it's only fair you do a bit for your son, too, Sean argued. You're much worse than your father. How have you survived until now? His mother retorted, overwhelming him with her anger. I had to suppress my laughter as I listened to their exchange. Before you two got married and he was still living at home, he never tried to make me do all these things. Clearly, he must have been relying on you a lot. He's so spoiled. She sighed heavily, looking annoyed at Sean, who awkwardly glanced at her and looked away. But he called me a wife who can't do any housework or cleaning, I said, laughing. That's terrible. Her face froze. Seeing him back at our house made it clear how much you've struggled. The bathroom is a mess. He leaves hair in the bathtub and doesn't care about making a mess. He's completely lost the sense of doing things himself. You were such a great wife for dealing with such a big baby. Please make up quickly and take him back, she begged desperately. I burst into laughter at her serious plea to take him back. Imagine, it's her own son and she's asking me to take him back. Well, I suppose if the husband supports the family financially, a bit of patriarchal attitude could be tolerated, but even a mother has her limits with a son acting that way. I've realized it's impossible for me, regardless of financial contributions. Look, Sean, apologize to Mindy. You must have acted like a big baby, making her angry, she said, grabbing his arm. He seemed reluctant, but apologized, sorry. Did you finally realize how much I've taken care of you? I asked. Seeing how much Mom disliked it, I've kinda got it, he admitted. Kind of, huh? I prodded. No, I mean, I really understand. I feel bad. It won't happen again. I shouted, that's what I wanted to hear, in my heart, and I almost smiled, but I kept it in. It was tough being criticized as a wife who couldn't do the housework or cleaning when I had tried so hard. Keep the patriarchal attitude in check, or even a 100-year romance can turn sour, I warned. Sorry. He genuinely apologized this time, seeming to have truly realized his mistake. His mother added, Your father grew up in the countryside with old-fashioned values, so I tolerate his patriarchal ways, but that can only be forgiven when there's real trust between a couple. Did you really listen to Mindy's feelings? She pressed him. I tried to communicate, but everything was denied, I said with a laugh. Oh, son, what have you done? She scolded him. Facing the criticism from two women, Sean looked like a chastened little boy. I'm sorry for such a son, Mindy, she apologized. Oh, no, it's fine. I'm not bothered anymore. I reassured her, and then Sean, holding my hand, pleaded. I'll change. Let's start over. It's too late now. I cut him off. What? He was stunned. What do you mean? I've already filed for divorce. You did what? I received the acceptance notice at the end of last week. Your part came to our house because you haven't changed your mailing address yet. What? You filed? Where? He stammered. Where else but the city hall? Calm down, I said. I am calm. I am. What? He exclaimed, clearly not calm and starting to panic. It seemed he hadn't expected me to actually file for divorce. You're just okay with divorcing so easily, even though we're newlyweds? He questioned. Yep, I am. After all, you negated everything about me, right down to my upbringing and personality, and then slapped the label of an incapable wife on me. Of course I consider divorce, I retorted. Sean, did you really do that? My former mother-in-law asked again in anger, and he went pale, admitting, Now that you mention it. Sighing deeply as she shook her head, she said, What are you gonna do? Sorry, but I can't keep you at our house any longer. I brought you here today so you can make up with Mindy. His face fell, and looking between me and his mother, he said, I have nowhere to go. However, both his mother and I shook our heads, showing we had no intention of taking him in. He slumped down, cradling his head. I was worried about being kicked out without having changed the house's ownership, but fortunately, it seemed he wasn't thinking that far ahead. I'm going home, his mother said, leaving him behind as she took a taxi. Well, I said, and quietly closed the front door. After a while, I could hear him sobbing, but I didn't open the door. Later on, he lived in a hotel before starting to live on his own again. He still claims to love me and has changed, asking for reconciliation numerous times, but I've been ignoring him. The house has been sold, so there's no reason for him to approach me anymore. Apparently, he's now banned from entering his parents' house. His presence has become a sort of trauma for his mother, worried he'll start mooching off them again, so it's not disownment, but a ban from visiting. Essentially, it's like being disowned though, since there's hardly any visiting. Thus, his patriarchal attitude caused him to lose 2 homes. The shock of the divorce has affected his job performance, and he's been surpassed by his juniors, leading to his current depressive state. He's too old to consider switching jobs and wants to consult me about it, but that's no longer my concern. As for me, my business is thriving more than ever. People ask if I plan to remarry, but for now, my work is my love. However, I've been getting dinner invitations from a man I do business with lately. Maybe my own romance is just around the corner. Who knows?